Hello guys, welcome back to a brand new video on Lexalexus. We're carrying on the relentless nature of the championship. We've now made it to week 32. So guys, make sure you do leave your score predictions in the comments down below. A prediction league update will happen some point in March. I am very busy with studies at the moment, but I am constantly trying to make sure I store all your predictions, and I will dedicate some time to catch up. I've already got a massive burden to catch up with, so I already know the work that I'm getting myself into. But don't you worry guys, you will get an update, and carry on leaving your predictions because it's always really interesting to me to see how you guys are finding with the championship season. So obviously we're going to round up these games. We've just had the FA Cup 5th round where we've had some amazing wins for championship clubs. So we're going to let the dust settle a bit and just gather our thoughts, and we're now going to carry on predicting the fate of 24 championship clubs in their next round of games. If you guys like what we see, please smash the like button. It really does help the growth of this channel. I think 50 likes will be amazingly appreciative if we can get there. Please do hit the subscribe button too. That'll be really helpful too. And please also share the channel too. All three of these things are free to do, and they all really help. Well, without any further ado, let's start predicting the championship for week 32. We start things off with Coventry going up against QPR. Coventry were involved in FA Cup action, but were one of the championship sides that wasn't really showing the best of their colours, unfortunately. They lost 4-1 to Ipswich Town. Maybe a little bit harsh on the scoreline, but it was a terrific day for Ipswich following the humiliating defeat they had against Southampton. They had to go into this game to prove a point that they were going to fight for every game from there on in. And Jack Clark had suddenly turned up in an Ipswich Town shirt. It's only taken him a couple of months, but he's now turned up properly, maybe arguably finding his level of opposition there. No disrespect to Coventry there. QPR, they themselves were involved in games recently, so they were involved in a win against Blackburn Rovers. They didn't actually play in the weekend, so that game against Blackburn was actually their contribution because Blackburn themselves were in FA Cup action. So it was a good win for QPR. They had to dig deep a little bit. They came from behind, and then they did eventually manage to get the winning goal actually quite late on in the game, and their game management from when I saw it was absolutely spectacular. They really nullified Blackburn despite them chasing to get something out of this, and I think that will help with this game here. But I really do think this will be close. Both sides have been picking up a good win. They've not necessarily been struggling with form, either one of these sides. Coventry will want to have a good response in the league. You know, obviously Frank Lampard's been leading good form, losing to Ipswich and then previously losing against Leeds by 2-0. They'll be wanting to try and get another win just to get their season back on track. As a prediction, I think at home, with the exception of that Leeds game, Coventry have been really strong at home since Frank Lampard has come in. And I do think that might make a small difference here, but a draw wouldn't surprise me. I'm going to go for a 2-1 victory to Coventry and just give them the slight edge with that impetus to give the fans a little bit of a positive response based on their two performances. But honestly, this game is so close, it really could go either way. Next up, we've got Derby and Oxford. This is going to be an interesting reunion, and it's another game where Gary Rowett plays a game against his former managed club. And very interesting conundrum going around Derby County as they search for a brand new manager. So since making my last video, Paul Warne has been shown the door as Derby County manager, and it didn't come as too much of a shock. Derby were in free fall with their form. They had the worst form in the league. In fact, were having a losing streak of 7 games going into their last game against Norwich, and they did manage to get a draw. Fair play to Jerry Yates to get that equaliser very late on. Late drama at Carrow Road, and it denied Norwich the chance to really stake some authority of trying to get into the top 6 as well. In fact, we've noticed it with a lot of the sides actually outside the top 6. They had a good opportunity to make some ground, and a lot of the teams didn't take advantage of that. Norwich weren't the only team that missed out on a really good opportunity. So Derby, it's hard to say what's going to happen with them. I'm going to assume that they still do not know who their permanent manager is by the time this game comes round. Following that, it will literally be played tomorrow. But as of recording, Derby have not got a manager yet. But the favourite, or at least the one that the odds are really pushing for, is John Eustace. Derby are really taking it seriously that they can pay John Eustace his compensation out of Blackburn Rovers and entice him to manage Derby County. It's going to be an interesting one to see how both parties of Derby and Blackburn are going to take to this transfer of clubs. Oxford themselves have had a pretty quiet time. They did play against Burnley recently, and it did inflict Gary Rowett's first league defeat as manager with a narrow 1-0 defeat to Burnley. Certainly no disgrace at all, considering Burnley have by far the best, defensive record in English football at the moment, and right now with them being near the top of the table, I think Oxford actually did pretty well just to keep the scoreline down. Here, I think it would have been a winnable game for Oxford, but now that Derby are kind of in this limbo of maybe having a really, really good manager at their realm, but I do think with the fact that they are going to have a bit of a managerial bounce, I might back Derby to get something here. I'm actually going to go for a 1-1 draw in this game. I can't really have the guts to back either one of them, but I think how it'll play out, I think it'll end as a draw. Next, we've got two relegation candidates, Portsmouth and Cardiff. This is a big game for both of these sides, as they could really start getting some breathing space between them and the bottom three. It is incredibly competitive in that bottom region of the table. Portsmouth did play a league game recently, of course, against Sheffield United. And I've got to say, I think they were quite unlucky not to get something. I thought Portsmouth actually played pretty well against Sheffield United, but they did not get anything to show for it. Cardiff were involved in a bonkers game in the FA Cup against Stoke City. You would have assumed that that game would have been potentially a stalemate. I did. But it ended in the end as a 3-3 draw, and Cardiff winning on penalties, and Aaron Ramsey ultimately getting his revenge on Stoke City. It was an unbelievable game. I would not have foreseen for a start for 6 goals to take place and for it to end in dramatic fashion in a penalty shootout. Just absolutely incredible, and a small example of the magic of the FA Cup is what I can say to that. But what I will say with this game, I definitely think they're both going to have a very similar recovery time going to this one, so I don't think each side is going to have an advantage of fitness and stuff. But I think with Portsmouth, with how they performed last time against Sheffield United, and considering how good their home form has been at this point, I might back them, and that will make things really interesting in the region of the Championship in the bottom part of it. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to Portsmouth, but this will actually make things really, really exciting and competitive at the bottom end of the table. Let me know what you think though in the comments down below. It should be a really close game. Next up is Watford and Leeds. Both played in the weekend. So Watford had league action against Sunderland. An unbelievable draw between the two. Watford were just minutes away of being the only side to have beaten Sunderland in the league at home this season. But Sunderland with a late equaliser, keeping their unbeaten home record until this very point of the season still. Leeds will be stepping back into the Championship after a defeat in the FA Cup against Millwall. They did actually have a good league game very recently though against Coventry, beating them by 2-0. A very professional performance. A Coventry side who are really, doing well with confidence. I backed a draw in that game. But Leeds, for me, for the fact that they did score quite pretty early on and they just allowed the game to flow at their tempo, was a sign of champions in my opinion. They really dictated the tempo and were actually calm and composed for most of that game. So it does give me encouragement for Leeds that they can certainly find some really good moments in those tough, close encounters to get the result. And I think this game might be quite similar to that. I think Watford showed a little bit of life against Sunderland. I've not been too convinced with Watford, but certainly that game against Sunderland really did catch my eye a little bit. As a prediction, I'm going to go for a 2-1 away victory to Leeds. It'll be a close one, as I said, but I do think Leeds will have the confidence and just the momentum for how the Championship is going, just to take them over the edge. But honestly, if Watford could get something, I wouldn't be surprised one bit, because I think they actually are doing a little bit okay now. Next, so we've got Norwich going up against Preston. So this is another Championship side who's played Championship football recently against another side who has played FA Cup action. So Norwich, as I mentioned, played Derby. Did take the lead from Josh Sargent. It was a pretty dramatic start with both sides having a disallowed goal in the opening couple of minutes of the game, but it ended up in the end as a draw. Preston were involved in a bit of a damp squid in the FA Cup, I can't lie, against high-flying Wycombe Wanderers in League One. It ended up as a 0-0 draw, and I believe it was Preston that edged them in the end in the shootout. So Preston will be moving on happily, but now going into this game, I think this will be a pretty interesting game to call. As a prediction, I think I'm going to back Norwich. I think their home form has been alright. I don't know what was going on with that Derby game. I mean, I could probably put it down to Derby actually upping their game with a bit of a managerial bounce. I think the fact we won't have that here, I think it might give Norwich a little bit more space to attack. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 victory to Norwich, but I don't know. This is going to be another really, really close one. I think all of these games at this point of the season now are going to be just even tighter to call and even more impossible to predict. Next, we've got Bristol City going up against Stoke City. Now, this game to me does scream a draw at this moment of time, because that's already what both these sides have been doing in the Championship. They've been meandering with their form a bit and have been very inconsistent with their wins and their defeats. And a lot of the time, draws kind of sandwich between those odd games. Now, Bristol City were involved in a defeat, actually, against Swansea. It gave Swansea their first win of 2025, a much-needed win for Swansea City, considering they were slowly but surely creeping down the relegation battle. And it has meant for Bristol City that it's only one win in 5 games. So I really do think they need to really up here. They also, like Norwich, had a good opportunity to actually enter into the top 6 with a good result, but they missed it. They blew it. They didn't even get a single point against Swansea there, who didn't pick up a win this year. Now, for Stoke City, of course, they were in a losing end against Cardiff City in the FA Cup. A very dramatic game overall. And it means Mark Robins will not have a semi-final FA Cup run this time around. But honestly, with how the game was going and how comfortable Cardiff were at one point, the fact that Stoke even brought it back was absolutely amazing. That game was unbelievable. I really did not expect to see that sort of game at all. And it would make sense that this game actually falls flat on its face and is nowhere near like that. But I do think it will be a draw, though. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw between these two clubs. I don't know who I would preferably edge out of these two. I think they are both operating at a similar level, personally. So I do think it will end as a draw. But let me know what you think, though, in the comments. Next, we've got Burnley and Hull City. So Burnley were going at a stage of being the only Championship team to beat a Premier League club, but that was before the madness that we had at Home Park, which I'll talk about very, very soon. But they beat Southampton away from home as well, which is an unbelievable result for Burnley, giving them a good statement of intent that they can mix it up against the lower Premier League sides with how they're playing at the moment. But facing the Hull side, who have been one of the lucky teams in the Championship to have an elongated break. They did not play in the midweek, and they did not play in the weekend game either. So Hull suddenly feel a lot more refreshed, and they've got a point to prove. They lost out last time against Stoke City. It was a very bad defeat, considering Stoke are a side are fighting relegation with them. But Burnley, we know already of their impressive defensive record, it's going to be very difficult for Hull to get something. I'm going to go for a 2-0 victory to Burnley. I think Burnley will carry on business as per normal, and it's just going to be a very difficult period for Hull, which they've got to ride out, and they've got to hope with the remaining winnable games that they've got that they can capitalise on those to start accruing more points to get themselves out of the predicament they find themselves. Next up, we've got Plymouth going up against Millwall. Now, both of these sides had impressive FA Cup results, and both probably would not have received backing to get a result against the ties they were given. So Millwall first played a very early game against Leeds United, beat them by 2-0, and I gotta say, I think Millwall are starting to play with a bit of swagger. They are gaining some form now. That's actually 4 consecutive wins in all competitions for Millwall, so Alex Neil is certainly turning a very positive corner. But they're facing a Plymouth side who they won their last championship game against West Brom in dramatic fashion by 2-1. And that followed with a 1-0 win over Liverpool. That's right, Liverpool, the team who are top of the league, who are likely going to win the Premier League, who are one of the favourites to win the Champions League, and are currently in the Carabao Cup final against Newcastle. So Plymouth Argyle are the team responsible for denying Liverpool of an English treble and a potential quadruple. I mean, that is sensational. It certainly puts the attention on Liverpool for not fielding a strong side, but Plymouth went strong and they took advantage, and fair play to them. It really was a magical moment for Plymouth, and I was really pleased that they had a shining light for what has been a pretty tough season for them as a whole. But I tell you what, if they win this game, they really can start believing that they might be able to get themselves out of the position they find themselves. They're still rock bottom by a good couple of points of safety, but a good run of form now, you just never know. As a prediction, I'm going to continue this fairy tale, and I'm going to go for a 2-1 victory to Plymouth. I mean, they won their last home game 2-1 against West Brom, who I deem as tougher opposition than Millwall. Millwall could certainly put in a good result. Alex Neil is a very tactically versatile manager, but I do think Plymouth, with how they're playing at the moment, they're playing with a lot more confidence. They're certainly backing Muslich as a coach, and I think we could see more fireworks at Home Park. Next up, we've got Sunderland versus Luton. Sunderland, of course, were involved in that draw against Watford very, very recently. But they were also involved pretty recently in an amazing 5-goal thriller against Middlesbrough, winning that by 3-2. Considering they are a top 6 rival, what an amazing result that was for Sunderland, and keeping the pressure on the top 4 in the championship. Although they did let 2 points slip against Watford, with Sheffield United winning their game. Bit of a blow, I can't lie, and especially with Leeds winning their game and Burnley winning their midweek games too. Missed opportunity for Sunderland to really keep up the pressure. Luton, likewise with Hull, were actually one of the sides that did not play in the midweek or the weekend. So their players would have certainly had a little bit of a break. But unfortunately, they're facing a Sunderland side who have not lost a home game all season. And Luton need 3 points, if anything. They're still waiting for Matt Bloomfield to get his first win as Luton Town manager. And the longer that wait goes on, the more pressure is going to be put on this club. As a prediction, I'm going to go for a 1-0 win to Sunderland. I don't see many goals in this game, but I do think it will favour the home side with them having a really strong run of form. And Luton, whilst they're refreshed, I just think their confidence is just not there at the moment. Next is Swansea and Sheffield Wednesday. Swansea were involved literally yesterday against Bristol City and getting their first win of 2025. Josh Tymon getting the only goal for Swansea City. A bit of a deadpan game, but it did end up in the favour of Swansea City, and they will be really pleased with that as they stop the rut. I think it was 5 defeats in a row for Swansea, if I'm not mistaken. So this was a really well-timed win for them to give themselves a bit of a breathing space of the pressure cooker that is the relegation battle this season. Sheffield Wednesday, they were involved in a very dramatic game against West Brom, which ended 2-1 to the Baggies. But Callum Patterson with a 93rd minute equaliser. We thought that Sheffield Wednesday salvaged a point, but no, Jason Malumbi, 96th minute, 2-1, red card. I mean, it was a classic example of handbags being thrown and tempers boiling over right at the end of a game. And certainly it was a championship classic. That's all I can say with that one. But as a prediction here, it's a tough one for me. I might edge this as a draw, you know. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Both sides have not been winning too consistently, so I would probably say that each one of them could end up drawing this game. So I'll go for a 1-1 draw. Our penultimate game sees Sheffield United versus Middlesbrough. Certainly, we've seen some really tough games for Middlesbrough recently, and this is another one of their repertoire. They're really going to prove if they can mix it within the top 6, if they can get round this round of games and still remain in touching distance of getting into that region of the table. So Middlesbrough, as I mentioned, their last game was that dramatic 5-goal thriller against Sunderland. They were on the losing side of that. It was a really good game to watch, honestly, and Middlesbrough will be really wanting to try and right those wrongs there and get a good result here. But Sheffield United are getting results, but they're not necessarily playing too well to get those results at the moment. You know, they played at home against Hull, lost 3-0. Then that follows with a pretty unconvincing performance against Portsmouth, but they still get a result. I think Middlesbrough will make things very difficult for Sheffield United. As a prediction, I think I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. I don't think Middlesbrough are going to quite have the talent to get the win over Sheffield United, but I can easily see them getting a result there. It really wouldn't surprise me based on how both these sides are performing at this moment of time. And the last game to predict is West Brom and Blackburn. I mean, I've got to sympathise for Blackburn Rovers. It must be bloody miserable supporting your club in the recent years than it has been. Any good thing that comes round gets snatched from you. And that might be what might happen really, really soon with John Eustace, as he's edging ever closer to become Derby County's new manager. And you think of the goal scorers that they've had and they've lost along their way as well. The likes of Ben Brereton Diaz, the likes of Adam Armstrong, for instance. So there's been some unbelievably talented players that have left this side, and ultimately they've had to feed off scraps to try and get the best results. Blackburn were involved recently against QPR, losing by 2-1. West Brom were on the positive side of a 2-1 win, this time over Sheffield Wednesday, as I mentioned. And what we did see was, I believe it was Carl Barley who got sent off for violent conduct. He will not be available for this game against Blackburn. Here, I do think it'll be West Brom who are the favourites. They are getting some consistency in their home form since Tony Mowbray has come in. I mean, of course, Tony Mowbray facing against his formerly managed club. So it's going to be a very interesting reunion as Blackburn visit Tony Mowbray as West Brom manager now. I'm going to go here 2-0 win to West Brom. I've not been too impressed with Blackburn's away form. West Brom's home form is ever improving, so I'll back the Baggies this time to get all 3 points. But let me know what you think, though, in the comments. Alright guys, that wraps it up today for this video. As always guys, make sure you leave your predictions in the comments down below. I will respond to them as many of them as I can. And obviously, if you do predict, you will score points on the Lexalexus Football Prediction League. But as always, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck if your side is playing in midweek. If you can smash the like button, it really, really would help. Subscribing and sharing too all really, really help. You guys are legendary if you saw any of this video. And as always, I'll see you guys soon. Take care, everyone.